Welcome back to Marvelous Videos. I'm Rylan, and this terrifying and powerful villain deserves your sympathy. Villains are often the result of trauma, loss, or even vengeance, or at least some of the villains of Batman are. Maybe this is why Batman never kills them, and leaves it up to the law, as he too has had his share of pain and loss. However, in today's video, we're talking about one such Batman villain who for sure deserves our sympathy. We are talking about the cryogenicist, Dr. Victor Fries, also known as Mr. Freeze. As a youngster, Victor had a fascination of freezing animals in order to preserve them, so that they might continue on living in the future. Concerned about this conduct, Victor's parents put him in a harsh boarding school, where he felt alone and depressed. However, when he met and befriended a young woman named Nora, the two fell in love, and subsequently married. But however, their joy was short-lived, as Nora was detected with a deadly condition, and Freeze, stricken with grief, sought to cure her by using cryogenetic technology. However, the experiment went horribly wrong, and Freeze's equipment misfired, devouring him and his lab in an icy blast. Victor had survived, but his body could now only exist in sub-zero temperatures, and Nora's health had worsened. In order to keep his wife's therapy going, he built a suit that would now protect him in his transformed state. However, he began robbing banks under the alias Mr. Zero in order to obtain money. He was finally stopped by Batman and Robin, but he persisted. As Mr. Zero, he employs cryogenetic technology to construct a pistol that fires a beam that freezes any object in its path. Everyone in Gotham City thought he was dead because he had faked his death. During this time, Freeze altered his suit and reappeared as Mr. Freeze, and he has been fighting Batman and Robin to this day. Before we get into our explanation, however, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is just a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks. Now, let's begin. Some of the best comics featuring Mr. Freeze. White Knight. During the rebirth era of the DC Black Label, a variety of alternate canon stories were imprinted so that writers could experiment with the DC characters and break the monotony of the main timeline. Sean Murphy's White Knight is one of those alternate timeline comics. In this timeline, Mr. Freeze is an ally of Batman. Batman here is more of a cruel person and is slowly losing the favor of Commissioner Gordon, his family, and Gotham itself. It is later revealed that the roots of everything was Alfred being on his deathbed, and Mr. Freeze agreed to Batman for keeping him alive. White Knight presents Von Freeze. In this storyline, Mr. Freeze is a Nazi Germany-era Holocaust survivor. The story runs through a flashback leading up to Mr. Freeze Sr., who travels to Gotham City and starts working with Thomas Wayne. Gotham Central in the Line of Duty. This series revolves around the members of the GLPD, with Batman being more of a peripheral character helping them out. They were against the monstrous and unhinged Mr. Freeze in the first two episodes of In the Line of Duty. First, Snow. Although the annual issue of this series by some fans, the New 52 reboot did give us some of the best Batman story arcs ever in 2010, thanks to the head creative duo Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. This story has a radically different origin story for Mr. Freeze, where Nora isn't his wife, but a stranger on whom he is experimenting. This twist in the conventional Mr. Freeze, along with his childhood grim with his mother, is what brought the controversies, but nevertheless, this story arc is one of the best. Battle for the Cowl, Commissioner Gordon, A Cold Day in Hell. This story follows the events after Batman was considered dead after his confrontation with Darkseid in the Final Crisis. Gotham City is without its Caped Crusader, and the extended Bat family sees turmoil descending on the city, while deciding upon who will don the cape and cowl. Mr. Freeze here, like the other villains, grew more threatening in the absence of Batman, wreaking havoc upon Gotham City. Mr. Freeze is seen to kidnap GCPD's Commissioner Gordon, and take him to the cold dark place where his voice is heard, saying that Batman won't be here to save him anymore. Dark Victory. In this storyline, Mr. Freeze is not the main antagonist, but was sent by Two-Face to exterminate Commissioner Gordon and company, while they manage to locate his hideout. This storyline follows the tragic downward spiral of Harvey Dent into Two-Face when he returns, and a mysterious hangman carries out hits against certain GCPD officers.
Freeze! Exactly.
Mr. Freeze at his vicious best. Among all villains of Batman, Mr. Freeze lacked a proper origin story that would give his audience a proper understanding of the character. However, the origins of Mr. Freeze from the comic, Batman Mr. Freeze, does suffice for the need. Written by Paul Dini and penciled by Mark Buckingham, the comic was the best origin story of Mr. Freeze. The plot begins with Mr. Freeze wreaking havoc on Gotham City with his cryogenic gun, freezing anyone he wishes to, with Batman on the way to the scene. Commissioner Gordon arrives and tries to stop Mr. Freeze, only to realize it's too risky, and the only option is to hold him back and evacuate the area till further reinforcements can arrive. Mr. Freeze lives up to his name by freezing random people on the streets, all based on his judgment, narrating about how after all these years, everything makes sense to him. He narrates how, as a kid, he was considered to be an embarrassment for his parents, owing to his fascination to freeze animals. All he wanted was to preserve them forever and not let them die. He recalls everything. He narrates how he fell in love with Nora, and how beautiful the feeling was. His happiness was taken away when Nora was diagnosed with a disease that gave her no chance of survival. He had left his job as a teacher and kept looking for companies that could fund his research on cryogenics, as he believed that it was the only way that Nora could be saved. After repeated rejections, GothCorp, owned by Ferris Boyle, agreed to pay for his research. So, one night, after the doctors had completely given up, Victor brought Nora to cure her in her cryogenic chamber. Boyle, on the other hand, had asked to stop Victor's research, as it was not cost-effective, and that night, when he was trying to cure Nora, Boyle and his men arrived to shut it down. The ensuing hassle led to an explosion, and Boyle thought Victor had died in it. Nora and the cryogenic chamber were in good condition, and so Boyle preserved it, in hopes of getting some profit out of it in the future. A year later, one by one, all the executives of GothCorp were getting assassinated by something unknown, until finally it is revealed that Victor is alive, but in a condition where he can only survive in sub-zero temperatures. He had a cryogenic suit and called himself Mr. Freeze. He finds Boyle in Nora's chamber. He freezes Boyle, and as he planned to take away the chamber, Batman arrived. Their confrontation accidentally led Mr. Freeze to shoot his cryogenic gun at Nora's chamber, shattering it into pieces. He realized his mistake and great loss, and he blamed Batman for it. He then swore to destroy everything Batman ever loved, starting with Gotham City. In the current scenario, where Mr. Freeze is causing a rampage to the city, Batman and Robin arrive, but Mr. Freeze shoots Robin and freezes him. He then taunts Batman if he now understands how a loss of a loved one truly feels. Before Batman could take control of his wits, he is caught by Victor's henchmen, and when he was about to get shot, he summons the Batmobile towards them at full speed, causing an explosion and throwing Batman to free himself from them. He later gets lured into the snowy Gotham Park Zoo, where he fights off two vicious polar bears and the most dangerous predator of the Antarctic on the water. All this happens while Mr. Freeze and his henchmen watch. Batman survived all of Freeze's traps and confronted him, smashing his glass helmet, making it impossible for him to breathe, as he could only survive at sub-zero temperatures provided by his suit. Mr. Freeze in Gotham. 3 months after morphing and becoming Mr. Freeze, Victor continues to live and work at Indian Hill to aid Hugo Strange's ambitions, but has grown increasingly enraged. When one of Strange's old Pinewood Farms test victims reappears, Strange chooses to silence her and believes it is time for Victor to try out his new modified suit. Strange and his aide, Ethel Peabody, approach Victor in his cell to present their plan, which pleases him. Victor, dressed in his suit and equipped with a Cairo rifle, freezes a road and collides with a prison transport van carrying Karen, as well as James Gordon, Bruce Wayne, and Alfred Pennyworth. Gordon begins firing at Victor to defend Karen. Victor is briefly stunned, but his suit protects him from any serious damage. Karen realizes that she is the one Victor desires and runs out in front of him, where he freezes her with his Cairo pistol, followed by him smashing her into several pieces. Victor then flees the area, using one of his ice grenades to hide his tracks. Strange had plans to demolish Arkham Asylum and devises a method to bring the dead back to life a few days later. Gordon, Bruce Wayne, Lucius Fox, and Selina Kyle were among those that he held imprisoned. Strange, seeing that time was running short, directed Freeze to assassinate Gordon, Bruce, and Fox. Strange became enraged when Selina intervened and called them out for their behavior, and soon he ordered Victor to kill her as well. Bridget Pike, Selina's friend, intervenes just before Victor is about to do so. Despite Victor's call for her not to move, she takes a stand, and the two end up in a duel, with Victor's ice ray versus Pike's fire. During this, Hugo Strange becomes caught in the crossfire while attempting to flee, leading both Victor and Pike to call a halt to their struggle. Gordon intervenes and successfully resuscitates Strange. During Oswald Cobblepot, or the Penguin's crusade against the monsters of Indian Hill, which resulted in both arrests and fatalities, Freeze was forced out of Gotham City, where he escaped to an icy region and began researching for a cure. Weeks later, Penguin and Ivy Pepper track down Victor Freeze and convince him to assist them in their vengeance against Edward Nygma. While claiming that he cannot tolerate temperatures below -50°F, he is resentful against Penguin and his defamation of the Indian Hill monsters. Penguin and Ivy Pepper were able to persuade Victor Freeze to join their cause by giving him his unique exosuit, which they had taken away from Wayne Enterprises. Bridget Pike was still furious with Victor Freeze when Cobblepot's friends regrouped at Penguin's mansion, as she instructed Penguin and Ivy Pepper to keep him at a distance. After Victor Freeze noticed a question mark on Penguin's picture and inquired about it, Penguin makes no response and informs Victor that he may sleep in the freezer. However, after being apprehended by the Court of Owls, Freeze and Firefly assume Oswald has abandoned them and fled his house. Fish Mooney approaches them instead, and they accept to work for her instead. They help her rescue Oswald Cobblepot from the clutches of Barbara Keene, Tabitha Gallivan, Butch Gilzean, and Edward Nygma. Mooney and several of her thugs walk to the train station in Gotham after the Tetch virus had been released on the city. While they're on their way out, the party is attacked by Bullock and Gordon, who want Strange. Gordon points his rifle at Fish with the intent of killing her, but before he can fire, a freezing ray from the side shoots his gun out of his hand. Mr. Freeze arrives from the shadows, and Fish chuckles and asks Jim if he really believed she'd go into the city alone. Mr. Freeze is one of the people that accompany Fish to Strange's hidden facility, where Strange provides Fish with the treatment for the Tetch virus. Nygma was taken aback when he learned that Oswald had been manipulating him, because he knew Nygma would take him there. When Edward Nygma is released from his frozen captivity, after more than 5 months, Oswald Cobblepot calls Mr. Freeze to the Iceberg Lounge with the goal of refreezing the Riddler. Victor Freeze, who was waiting in the shadows, then zapped the revolver from Nygma's grip before threatening to freeze him once again. He changed his mind and claimed that he would make Edward live without knowing who he truly was, sparing his life from another shame. After presenting the frozen penguin to Sophia Falcone, Freeze requested the monetary payoff for his arrest. Jerome Valeska, Jervis Tetch, and Jonathan Crane all escaped from Arkham Asylum. Penguin took control of the manor after Sophia Falcone's downfall. Valeska planned to recruit the criminals for his terrorist organization, assembling Victor Freeze and Bridget Pike, as well as fellow escaped Arkham inmates Jervis Tetch, Scarecrow, and Oswald Cobblepot, in one Legion of Horribles. Jerome then took the whole Legion to the Falcone mansion, much to Penguin's displeasure, who took control of the manor after Sophia Falcone's downfall. Thereupon, Mr. Freeze raised his arm, but Valeska commanded him to put all questions on ice until the end, before Jerome turned to Oswald, thanking him for doing his part in hosting them today. Just then, Jervis Tetch entered the Falcone mansion and came into the dining room. He walks over to Jerome, who asks Jervis to sit down and join their conversation by pointing at the empty chair next to him. Once that happens, he could care less how the other members of the Legion of Horribles rip the city apart. The Legion of Horribles return to the Falcone mansion after completing their individual tasks. Penguin managed to recruit Solomon Grundy for the Villain Alliance, much to Jerome's delight. Victor Freeze and the other members of the Legion went to Gotham City Hall to abduct the mayor, Holden Pritchard. Scarecrow and Victor, two of Jerome's disciples, broke into Wayne Industries' chemical facility in order to obtain more of the poison. While Scarecrow sprayed some of the lab employees with laughing venom, Mr. Freeze got out his freeze cannon and froze numerous chemists. Around the same time, Jerome Valeska died after jumping off a building, and the Legion of Horribles was permanently dissolved. When Gotham Metropolis becomes an abandoned wasteland, all of the villains claim their domain and seize control of specific areas of the city. Freeze then raises his goggles, signaling to the frozen criminal that this is now his domain. Over the next few months, the GCPD are able to recover the property previously owned by Victor Freeze. However, Mr. Freeze instantly freezes the man as he raises his rifle. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to send a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. For Marvelous Videos, I'm Rylan. Have a good one, be safe, and thanks for watching.